I think it's interesting times that we live in, because I've just been a very interesting morning where we're talking as a school to collaborate with different schools. So on Monday I was in Guangzhou looking at collaborations about the city with Jiaoshu. This morning I was talking to a professor from Oregon about a collaboration that we could do in the Galapagos Islands. And now I'm introducing some architects from Paris who are talking about Los Angeles. So these are really kind of interesting times that we live in, and it shows that the diversity that's coming through our school. But I'm here to introduce the second public lecture. And I think the importance of the lecture series that we have this semester is that they fall under the verb of this title, which is Architecture as a Verb. And so what we've tried to do is we've tried to distinguish the two programs that we have in the School of Architecture, which is the undergraduate course and the master's course. And for the undergraduate, we've identified this word, which is architecture as a verb. And I see a little bit, of course, I don't know your work very well, but I see that you are interested in something that relates very closely to a verb that we have in the second year. And this verb is to measure. And I think the way that an architect or architects measure the city or measure their work is through a lens. And looking at your work online, I think measure and photography are two things that come, in a way, are two similar things. A lot of the measuring that we do is measuring and then through drawing, but the medium of photography, I think, is also another way of measuring. On one way, it's also measuring light, but on another level, it's also measuring how people live in a city. And I think if you see every year we have a kind of a slogan or a little bit of a manifesto that defines the identity of our school, and this year it's architecture with people. And I think it's so important in architecture and for our students to realize that people live in the city, people live in architecture. The second part of my introduction and looking at your work was fascinated by this city that I know. I find it very difficult to understand, but love at the same time, is Los Angeles. And I think more than anything, Los Angeles has something that is amazing, which is the light. The light of Los Angeles is unparalleled. It's cinematic, it's alive, and I've only ever experienced that in another city, which is Madrid, but it's a very special light, and you have to sort of witness it to fall in love with it. And at the same time, looking at your work, I was reminded by maybe a hero of mine that comes from Los Angeles and embodies that light, which is the director, David Lynch, who recently passed away. And what I think is interesting is this eye that David Lynch has that is most definitely Los Angeles. And I think it's a city that is at the same time real but abstract. And I'm very interested to hear about how architects are using this light and the light of photography to depict and to paint a little bit like David Lynch is, because sometimes he's a director, sometimes he's a painter, and as architects I feel that we resonate very closely to that. So it's a very kind of esoteric introduction to you, and I'll let my colleagues introduce you. But I'm very happy that you're here and very happy to hear about your work. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe Elva.
Yes, very shortly. Cyril and Caroline, I met when I was a bit younger at Atelier Jean Nouvel. And they are still involved with Atelier Jean Nouvel. Cyril is completing the new Cartier Foundation that will replace the old iconic Cartier Foundation of Jean Nouvel. So they're opening that later this month. And Caroline has also some teaching involvement in Paris Versailles. So that is a school collaboration we hope to pursue later also. They have an office in Paris called Fairfax, and yes. So I met them in Jean Nouvel early on in a career, and every holiday they would travel to, every second holiday at least, they would travel to Los Angeles, and I thought, boy, they really like that city a lot, but after a year or two, they even moved there, they said, and they left this relatively good job in Jean Nouvel, a very interesting project we were doing there, and they decided to just move to Los Angeles to make even more photos. And they were making photos and photos and photos of that city. And when I saw, when they come back, the monumental scope of the work they did, I understood what kind of dedication, what kind of passion they developed for that city, and how unique the result is that they really uncovered a research about that city that is really their own. They really discovered something unique about the city, some vernacular typologies there that by the sheer mass of the work they produced, they documented and made a very convincing case for Los Angeles architecture. And I think it was very inspiring, and I thought we could bring them here to Hong Kong and maybe reproduce that process a little bit, because I think Hong Kong has perhaps as many very particular, very idiosyncratic architectures as Los Angeles have. So that's why they're here for this lecture, but also here for a workshop this week with our students, where we initiate a work about documenting the vernacular architectures of Hong Kong as well. But I will leave the words to you, and thank you for coming.
Merci.
Thank you very much.
C'est toi qui commence à...
Oui.
Ouais, tu te présentes. Oui.
Non, je pense qu'on
Bon, c'est pas la peine, ouais. Tu passes les slides alors.
Ouais. Yes.
Oh, hello, and thanks for having us. We'll start with a little prologue before that lecture. A month ago, we were traveling in the French countryside of Charente, and we saw that gate. It's a farm gate. We haven't noticed it until 15 minutes later, we saw another one. Then in another village, that exact same door with a different color. And then another one, and like that everywhere. And in the evening, we realized that the entrance of the place we were staying in had exactly the same typology of door. Two doors under a double arch. The large door giving access to a courtyard for trucks and stuff, like commercial stuff, and the pedestrian access leading directly to the house. It wasn't socially conceivable to share one door or to build a small one within the big one in that region. Every self-respecting farm had to have that set of gates. Hanging out in a city with a camera is like having a sketchbook. It allows you to note certain details, to keep in mind elements of architecture, and to preserve a memory of what you've seen. It sharpened your eyes.
When we discovered LA for the first time, we were students in architecture, and we were struck by its hugeness. LA looked like an endless garden city composed of single-family houses, and it sprawls over 120 kilometers by 120 kilometers. Located on the west coast of the US, it extends between the water and the desert. It's sprawled over large plains on both sides of Santa Monica Mountains. And before urbanization, LA used to be a land of farms and orchards of orange tree until 1900. Its urbanization started in the beginning of the 20th century, and LA became a megalopolis in 1 century, going from 100,000 people to 17 million today. So like the West US territory, LA was divided into federal grid of 1 mile by 1 mile. Inside this grid, developers created lots of the same size, of 15 meters by 45 meters, to welcome newcomers coming from Eastern US, looking for the American dream, a house and a garden. The city developed a long car cable network, which was replaced later on by freeways in the 40s. Residential and business areas are separate. And since LA was developed after Industrial Revolution, it has no center, but large areas dedicated to industrial activities in a different part of the city. Movie industry in Central and North Plain, aeronautic industry on the coasts, commercial harbor and oil industry in the south. And little by little, these different areas became one huge city called Greater Los Angeles. Yeah.
Pass the slide. When we arrived in LA, we found that big guidebook, which was made by David Gabbard and Robert Winter, two history professors at Santa Barbara University. They started to collect addresses in the 60s, gathering all the great architectural buildings we could see in the area. Along with their comments, they had drawn those beautiful little maps to lead you to the right spot. From that book, we understood that Los Angeles was the laboratory of modern architecture. It was the laboratory of domestic architecture, in fact. The book was published by the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, considering then architecture like artwork. At that time, we had visited all the Frank Lloyd Wright architecture all over the US, and we were in Los Angeles to see his textile block architectures. The Innis Brown house was the first of our series, entirely built with the same concrete block unit. It was really astonishing. Then beside that one, we went to see the Miller house, the Freeman house, the Storer, all made with that same technique, and it was very impressive. They look like a monomaterial architecture. And those houses were from the 1910 to 24. So very early in the century. Though through the guide, we discovered other architects like the Green brothers, who had built the very huge bungalow in the posh area of Pasadena. Then Irving Gill, another architect who was making houses in the Mexican adobe style, a traditional technique inherited from the Mexican when the California was still was not annexed by the US. Then we discovered Rudolf Schindler, who arrived in LA to work on the Frank Lloyd Wright's houses. And he started his own office with that project, his own house. He was seduced by the California weather, so he had designed an interior, exterior house. He would sleep outside he had built a den on top of the house and he would sleep outside. So a very interesting project. He built for a rich client of the city, the Howe House and the infamous Lovell Beach House. Oh, sorry. Amongst other buildings. Then Richard Neutra, an Austrian architect like Schindler, moved to California to start to build houses as well. It's interesting to note that in that period of time, architects in Los Angeles could do their whole career at building houses. Lloyd Wright, the son of Frank Lloyd Wright, who came along with Schindler to oversee his father's construction, started to build houses for the people from the movie industry. This one is the Taggart house for his girlfriend, and then the Navarro, and then a lot of houses. After World War II, several housing programs started to challenge architects. The idea was to build simple and cheap with new materials produced from the war effort. The Case Study House program gave us landmark example of architecture, like the case study number 22 that you can see here, famous because of this shooting from Julius Schulman, or the Eames Studio, built for themselves as the case study number 8. The number 16 from Craig Elwood was also an emblematic typology of architecture in the Californian architecture. It blurs the boundary between the interior and the exterior. We never know where we are, if we are inside or outside. Then the case study 21 from Pierre Koenig, where the carport is designed as one of the main rooms of the house. The cars will be parked almost in the kitchen. It also gave us a good example of cantilevered house. This one from Pierre Koenig. And this house was made by another architect, Quincy Jones, it was part of another type of program called the Mutual Housing Association. Then John Lautner, a disciple of Frank Lloyd Wright, for whom he was driving that project in Brentwood, a very tiny house, like standing in a steep slope. This guy became one of the most famous architects in California and in Los Angeles, giving some of the most dramatic houses in the city, like this one, the Garcia House, or the infamous Chemosphere. Lots of Hollywood movies were shot in those buildings and many other houses from him. Frank Gehry started to build for him and for his friend with poor materials like corrugated metal, chain links, and wood. This house was his one until 2 years ago when he moved to a new one.
We could go on and on to show you incredible houses. It's what we've done for many years, and the guide took us all over the city for 15 years. We drove so much. But beside our home architecture tour, we were fascinated by its vernacular architecture. So we began to take photos of the built environment, like archaeologists, houses, church, commercial building, street, boulevard, vegetation, motel, front yard garden, warehouse, gas station, diners, malls, signs, googies. Around us, people, our architects from European city were clueless in regard of LA urbanization. They were lost, disoriented. We needed to document the city until we completely understand it, and we wanted to capture his strange beauty.
Our photo corpus remains the body of work of some photographic mission in the history of photography. Since the invention of photography, people or government had organized a large campaign of shootings. In 1851 in France, the French government requested a survey of all the architectural monuments they had in the country. And they commissioned 5 photographers like Gustave Le Gray and many others for what they call the heliographic mission. We can see here several buildings from the antique period to the medieval period in France, as they were in 1851. Another interesting mission was the Archives of the Planet. Commissioned by the private businessman Albert Kahn in 1910, the goal of that guy was to get a true picture of life on a global scale. He hired 15 photographers and sent them out worldly, mainly in Europe, Asia, and North Africa. Then for 20 years, those guys brought back 72,000 autochrome, which was the ancestor of the color photography. What interested us in those missions is the curatorial aspect of the work. Albert Kahn uses that work to spread out understanding of different culture. He would present the photo in private event at his big home, showing all that pictures to his social network. The heliographic mission was a collection of proof of monument statue at a precise period. They were scientific clues. On our side, we felt like we were missionary in Los Angeles. We had collected that kind of material.
Some artists also would work with urban photography as an artistic medium. We would like to talk about Canaletto, an Italian painter from 18th century that produced vedute in Venice and other cities throughout his career. Vedute are large views of the city with infinite number of details. His painting was made by using a camera obscura. He would build a room in the city that captured a point of view and project it on a paper. He would then redraw it on top of the projection. Painting was then completed in his studio, and the result was a very objective testimony of the city, almost a photographic one. Closer to us, Desroche, artist based in LA since the 60s, has created a lot of artwork on Los Angeles. One of his famous is the elevation of legendary Sunset Boulevard. This is a fold-up called Every Building on Sunset Strip. It allows to show the elevation of the entire boulevard on an 8-meter strip, assembly of elevation in a perfect horizontal manner. Russia is a pop artist, and the city is like raw material. He shots banalities through insignificant places that talk about everyday life in LA, swimming pool, housing apartments, parking lots. He gathers series of each theme, and from his photos, he's going to produce painting and books. Here is another great source of inspiration. This is the work of the famous German couple Bernd and Hilla Böscher. They shot industrial heritage of Germany, Europe, United States, and they produced thousands of images in minimalist manner. Like Roche, they organized their photos by typologies. This assembly of 12, 18, 24 construction of the same typology brings out the formal beauty of these utilitarian constructions. They change the look we have towards this construction and change this building into iconic monuments. At some point of the process, it becomes obvious that we needed to organize our photos by typology and that we would make a book out of them that would allow readers to look at LA with different eyes.
Yeah. Thereby, in 2005, we decided to move to Los Angeles to make a photographic portrait of the city. Our idea was to describe the uniform urban fabric, to show subject in its repetitive pattern, to give clues to understand the cityscape and look at vernacular architecture in Los Angeles. The use of a large amount of images, to use that, we started to organize them by typology. We could compare them, analyze them, and classify. They became extensive series, gathering around 100 images as an echo of the hugeness of the city. We selected 15 series typical of the town, of its built environment. To us, they would constitute the standards of Los Angeles. We'll present you 6 of them. The series of billboards is one of those characteristic examples. They are monumental structure supporting oversized panel showing advertisement or commercials, which must be seen from a moving car. So they are big. They are all equipped with catwalk, ladder, lights. By their size, they look like buildings. They are emerging from the ground or rooftops. To compare and find analogies, we classified them by type of structure. Here you can see the I-beam post structure. Then the triangulated structure, very dense. It's usually sitting on a rooftop. It shapes a big volume at the base of the panel. And the most common is the pipe structure. It's a single massive cantilevered steel cylinder supporting the whole system. It has a minimum impact on the ground, even though it looks very, very strong. They are sometimes carrying twin panels. They look like a giant butterfly. Then microarchitecture is another series of typologies. LA is a car city. The urban fabric is extremely stretched, and there are parking lots everywhere. They are sized according to turning radius of cars, leaving a lot of residual spaces. These are used by microarchitecture. Those tiny buildings pops like mushrooms. There are no parking lots without a microarchitecture. It participates to the sprawl of the sprawl look of the city. They are used by small businesses like fast food, tobacco shop, coffee shops, mostly locksmith, a lot of locksmiths, and sometimes camera shops, car repairs. We even found a psychic reader. The one on the right-hand side was built by Frank Gehry as the ticket booth of the MoCA Museum.
City developed around dense cable car network, the biggest of the US, and since the 40s was replaced by freeways. By the 70s, freeway network structured all greater LA. LA was a car city, everybody has a car. It becomes like a suit, and driving in LA is a wonderful experience when you're not in a traffic jam. Rainer Burnham, architecture historian, calls them true landmark of Los Angeles. Intersections are monumental. They soar upward and seem suspended in the sky. They are the only concrete structure of the city, as buildings are mainly wood or steel structure. This could be a great OMA building. LA is also a true garden city, the only example of that size due to the quality of its streets. In the early LA, developers divided the land into individual plots. They built roads and they planted trees to make their estate more attractive. They would advertise it as living in an Eden. The street is split into several layers: the road, the setback, and the plot. The setback is a narrow piece of land along the catwalk that allows to plant trees. Developers planted one kind of tree per street, which gives a different character, a different landscape to each street. LA is like a catalog of trees: palm tree, jacaranda, pepper tree, pine tree. 100 years later, trees got majestic, and they create impressive perspective. So like the buildings that repeats in the city, we gathered in the book streets that have the same tree varieties, even though they are spread around in the city.
Behind the curtain of trees, everyone owns the same piece of land, which is 15 meters by 45 meters. And everyone is free to build the style of house they wish. It gives the city a great diversities of construction and this heterogeneous look to the street. It looks like the movie set has contamined the domestic architecture. At the right up corner, we can see the Spadina house, which is actually this building was built for a studio and then moved on a lot for a housing purpose in the 20s. Now it's a monument of the city. We observed that developers in the 20s, as part of their construction catalogs, were building these Hansel and Gretel type of cottages. They are all the same if you look at it closer, and they are everywhere in the city. We also find some eclectic Tudor style of house, French chateau style, Greek revival facade. On their side, these houses are always separate from the street by a front yard garden, and it contributes to the facade ornamentation. The front yard gardens, combined to the public street that Caroline just mentioned, are they unify the cityscape. It gives to LA this aspect of the garden city. Another very typical series is the dingbat. Built on the same lot as the regular house, so 15 by 45 meters, that apartment building appears in the 50s. It was the developer response to the strong demand in small apartments and to increase the increase of private cars. That typology is always the same, a stucco box listing 10 units inside, which occupied the whole lot, and the front facade perched on stilts to allow park underneath. The front yard garden is transformed into a concrete ramp and the vegetation totally disappears. It's funny to see the identity of the building is displayed using special devices like graphic colors or mosaic pattern, sculptural shape of stars or sun, exotic names like Capri or Le Versailles. The facade is reduced to a simple decoration screen. We found a lot of dingbat everywhere in LA, and it was very interesting to compare and analyze their design. They are sometimes mirrored on the twin plots. The space left for vegetation is reduced to the minimum. All that work to analyze and analyzing and classification became a great tool for us. It shaped our mind and our way of acting as architects. In that last part, we will introduce you to the research we have done on the densification process of the city.
This aerial photo shows densification impact on the city scale. We can observe that the garden city loses its vegetation on the right side with in the dingbat areas. As part of a competition to create 100 housing units in LA, we made a research on densification based on our photographic survey. This shows a typical lot of 15 by 45 meters, where we can see the division of the land in the case of a house and a dingbat. So we can see that in the house, the garden occupies 50% of the land and disappears totally in the dingbat buildings. The competition was a case study to rethink the model of the single-family home in order to answer several issues like sprawl limits, traffic, housing crisis. As authorities allowed owners to increase density on the plot, the competition goal was to create dense housing projects that would keep the character of the individual house that would be different from the dingbat. For us, its identity was depending on the good balance between garden, car, and house. Therefore, we analyzed 16 housing projects of LA, 4 generic ones, and 12 housing projects made by architects. The first process of densification is the house behind the house. It's a soft densification that allows to get 2 to 3 houses on a lot. The multiplication of the number of construction on the ground still allows to keep a front yard garden and small gardens on the back. The Bankalo court follows the same process to multiply houses in the ground at a bigger scale. It usually takes place on twin plots, and it increases the number of units up to 14 houses. Garden in the center replaces the front yard garden and create a nice common space to access the house. This is another typology called condominiums. They are the multi-unit complex the most common in LA. They consist of apartments that are nested in large buildings, looking like mansion. It allows to have a front yard garden, and the main facade plays with vegetation and participate to streetscape, like the house. Cars are parked in the back of the lot, and the rear garden has disappeared.
Besides those generic architecture, we analyzed 12 buildings made by architects. Our goal was to understand how they dealt with the three components, the parking, the home, and the garden. We looked at Charles Moore, Schindler, Neutra, Gehry, and Lautner housing. And we set up these diagrams for each project to see how the building were implemented on the land, to compare what was the proportion of the construction versus the lot. We set up these, we made another comparison diagrams to check how much surface of land was dedicated to cars, considering the carport as well as the alley to reach it. Then we compared the common garden, where they had some, and the private gardens.
Rich from all this knowledge, we started to implement our project on a typical lot, looking in parallel to its multiplication and the impact on the city scale. So the concept was simple, to stack the house and parking in order to keep 50% of the land for the garden. The goal was to have an open ground to plant big-sized trees. We would then multiply the project on the sides of the competition with mirrored lots, and in the multiplication, the gardens would be all connected. Like Bangala Court, housing units are organized around a central garden, the interpretation of the front yard garden of the single-family house. It becomes the main access to the apartments, as stairs and circulation space cross the garden to get to the upper apartments. We also wanted to provide the exterior extension of the house that we find with the rear garden of the single-family house. We provided an exterior room to each apartment. These are located on the roof or cantilevered baskets above the garden. So this was a glimpse of our research on a Los Angeles densification process. Our analysis of the city led us to understand some urban issues and helped us to have a singular approach in an architectural answer. It continues to infuse, as these urban issues are common to many places in the urban development today. In France, for example, densification of the suburban areas is a big debate. Housing crisis, global warming, inhabitant diversity, urge to redefine the ideal of the single-family house. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm deeply impressed by the process, and also interested in the fact that you went there to study particular architects and particular architectures, and it took you a little time, and then you started to realize the chronology. I find interesting that you started to realize Actually, it's the vernacular that then you wanted to document afterwards and so on. Do you think that methodology is applicable for any other city, or is Los Angeles a unique case where so many particular architectures have been developed for whatever reason? Or do you think if you spend time in a place, there will always be an emergence of idiosyncratic particular architectures that belong just to a city?
Well, in fact, I think this process can happen everywhere, actually, in every city. It's what we really wanted to show, in a way, is the beauty of the vernacular, and each city has its own identity, and we just have to look at it. Mm-hmm. So it's really a manner to look at things, at the city that allows to yes, to define and to also to find his own built environment, his own characteristics.
Mm-hmm. Also, it's interesting to understand why they have been made this way. This observation allows us to try to understand why it's you know, the Los Angeles is a giant garden city, and at the beginning it has a sense for the Americans, you know, and now it's changing into a very, very dense city. The vegetation is disappearing everywhere, and the face of the city is completely changing, making a very hard city to live in.
And I think we can look at any kind of city this way, small size city, villages, or big towns. It's a
French countryside.
Yeah, it's a great tool just to learn how to look at architecture.
Yes.
And also to communicate, because I think the idea behind it is that we really wanted to share our passion for this city, mm-hmm. and to give tools for people to look at it and to understand it.
Do you think Los Angeles is developing new vernacular typologies as a further densification now, or are we losing some of? How is it going into the future? This ongoing transformation.
Well, it's changing a lot in the past 10 years. Densification even got stronger. And so they are importing some kind of European typology, mm-hmm. With building huge building where with fake fountains, and it's a bit strange, but I mean they've never finished to change the city, and it's true that we're gonna see, but it might produce like some kind of new housing complex, but we don't see that with we are a bit how to say worried, yes, about about it. Yeah.
It's the international style that is going back in revert style to
exactly.
America, and
mm-hmm.
and homogenize the general urban landscapes.
What was interesting is that the vernacular we looked at was really linked to the use of the car. So it was different from European cities, because the car would generate these shapes, these buildings, these minimals, and these signs. So to import like European, well, in a way, it's not a car building anymore. So this was a really important part of the characteristics of LA, and that are lost in these new buildings.
Are there any other questions? comments?
Maybe I have a question, just a different point of view, just to ask you what you think about it. Because when I go to LA, I find it a very lonely place. Everywhere you have to drive by car, and it's very difficult to meet people. You've got to organize a meeting, and you got to organize it by car. You got to leave 2 hours before, because otherwise you get in traffic. And so I'm attracted to go to areas like Koreatown. I'm attracted to the messiness, and I feel that there's a lot of LA that is, in a way, to use a word that is not the right word, but gets contaminated by many different cultures and is extremely interesting and gets messy. And you don't show that, and I can see why. But what's the relationship between and what's the message for also for students looking at this work, because the work is very beautiful architecturally, and I'm just wondering how the beauty of the buildings, and then sort of is one side of LA, and then it's the very messiness, the very kind of, it's very dangerous at night. The other side of LA, the urban kind of side, and what you think about that. And I know I'm not asking you why you don't show it, but how do you, when you go there, how do you relate to it as architects?
Tu veux commencer?
Well, for the multi-ethnicity social life in Los Angeles, we haven't, in the book we have 15 typologies. Here we just show like 6 of them. But the first one is what we call the minimal signs, which are those typical signs that we can find everywhere in the city. And they show in each areas, the signs are they are like they show what kind of people lives in this community. Yeah, they show the different community of Los Angeles. So we shot them at night because it's like glowing, and it was very when we look at them, in like a big package of 100 pictures, it's very interesting to see how you can pass from one community to another one. And then after, that's true that Los Angeles is a pretty hard city in terms of tensions, but what's interesting is the whole town is the same. That means at the beginning, they partitioned the land with this grid system, and they sold the lots, which are all the same, the 15 meters by 45 meters. And in the posh area like Pasadena or Santa Monica, you find this land, and in the what they call the ghetto, the Compton or Carson City, it's exactly the same land. So it's interesting to see that at the beginning, architecture or the desire of urbanism, the country, had no, it was not as evident as it is now to see that the ghetto is here and the Santa Monica is somewhere else. It's the same urbanism, and that's what interested us. We didn't want to show that in that area it's harder than in this one, since everybody has a house and a garden. You know what I mean? It's we didn't want to.
And it's interesting, in fact, to see, I mean, the community that have, I mean, in fact, all communities have a garden, have plots with garden and house. And usually you can see that by driving, you can see there is poverty because there are no plantation, no vegetation in the gardens. Everything, it's a desert climate, so where there is no money, in a way there is no garden. So it's just, yes, a carpet of yellow, burnt vegetation. You still have trees though. Trees are part of the cityscape. So trees really are spread around all the city, even though it's a poor community or rich community. So, but it's, and actually what is interesting is that this urban system is different from European city, for example, where, well, in a way, yes and no. The problem is more geographic, because people like to live in, a community that is like them, where they can feel that they are, part of it. And so, like in European city, you have some kind of ghetto, some community, some places that, condense poverty or richness. And and we know that in the US right now, and we have they have issue with yes, they really have issue with poverty and people sleeping in the streets, and so it's a reality. But in a way, in LA, you won't see it much. It doesn't really appear in the city because it's so sprawled around that this poverty is going to be visible in like the downtown LA or in certain communities in the south part of Los Angeles. But then you will have 80% of the city that where you feel safe. So yeah, I don't think it's funny, but I don't think the black part of Los Angeles is not the one we see and we discover, and it's not the one we wanted to talk about, since it's already something that is part of the movies and film industry, and it's not really it's not what really we feel when we are in the town, actually. I think it has also a lot to do with fiction. And it's maybe the reality for some people, but for sure, but it's not a common thing.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hello, thank you very much for the presentation. And I would like to have a little bit of discussion with you. Because first of all, when you started your presentation, actually you started with how the Los Angeles was actually composed as a city. So you were explaining the American grid systems and the parcellations, and then how the infrastructure network was superimposed on top of this. And then in the end, you also explained where the harbor area was actually located in the city. And then when you went to this typology study of the city, and I think your work reminded me of these two very important figures in our field. And the first one would be the Italian morphological schools, so Morirotti and Edo Rossi, when they studied the typology of Venice architecture and the evolution of typology itself. And then another one, of course, learning from Las Vegas, from Venturi. But I feel like the two studies, both of them were actually from the 60s and 70s, and those were mainly, they were discussing about how the city actually was composed from architecture point of view. And the Venturi work was also actually on a little bit of a middle scale, explaining how people perceive city in a car. So I was actually thinking, because it's really interesting, it helps us to understand how architecture, typology compose the city. I was thinking, would it be a possibility in the future that you guys would think of to come back to the city again and to really get back to the larger city map and explain how the typology actually is located in the city and how the city evolve over time and how these typologies actually tell the story of a city. Because and then this helps us link back to the urban context. Because you started with urban context, and then you get back to architecture, right? And I was actually expecting a little bit we get back to the city again. So I was thinking probably that would be interesting for the future exploration. Just a little bit of discussion. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. it's actually very interesting that we intentionally wanted to redraw the city. So by gathering all the typologies, because the city is really spread out, we wanted to show the combination of typologies, so we get a clear idea of, is urban material, and it's also because it's the way to show this, to redraw the map of Los Angeles for us was the idea of driving the city. Los Angeles is like multiple, like a combination of multiple communities. You can, each area has its own little center of commercials and shop, and in a way, for us it was more important to show what was repeated in the city, so to get to understand what was, his characteristic, and not really to point out where it was in the city. It's, in a way, this city is too big for that. There is no center. There are multiple centers. And his identity is, there are no identities per communities. There are, but there are small centers for sure. And actually, communities living there are different. You have Koreatown, Chinatown, and it's a lot of communities live in the same kind of buildings. So it's so for us it was more interesting to talk about the generic, which is spread out, than giving a real idea of what is Los Angeles.
Our idea was to give a global picture, to give a big picture of the materiality of the town. So we didn't want to separate like Koreatown from the harbor area, from Santa Monica. We really wanted to bring together those little things which made the substance of the area, of the greater Los Angeles.
And the other reason is that the plot, this measure of the city is so important. The same plot covers all the city. So in a way, looking at this typology on the plot is really is really interesting, and it's multiplication that makes the city. And in a way, we also use this process when we did this competition in LA for a housing project. We thought about, we did a project on a plot, and then we worked with multiplication as does the city.
Here, thank you very much. As your research is developed through photography, I wanted to ask if you could talk a bit more about the way you shoot. For example, like why the images you decided to shoot in a very static way, for example, or you are documenting vernacular or popular architecture, but you are deciding also intentionally to leave people outside the frame, also about the format, or if you could talk a bit more about the creative decisions that you took in order to do your photographies.
Well, at the beginning, we would shoot Los Angeles like architectural tourists. So we had we didn't have any frame in mind. Then when we decided to do the book, we gathered all the pictures we had, and then we started to organize them, and we found, after the Becher and all those people, we found that could be interesting to have some kind of like a frame, like rules to make the pictures, you know, not to make them all the same, but to at least to have the backgrounds always the kind of the same, and then the lights in the right position, and no cars in between us and the scene. So we found some of the pictures we already had like that, so we selected them, but we reshot all the scene in the ideal position to make a good picture. So that was a pretty long process. We also wanted to have at least 60 to 100 images per series. So we focused on the series we picked at some point.
In fact, regarding people, it wasn't. It was really not a choice to not have people on the pictures. Actually, there was no people when we took the pictures. You don't see much people on the sidewalks because it's very hot in Los Angeles, so you don't walk in the city. You're going to see people walking around in the shops area, but otherwise you don't see much people on the sidewalks. And otherwise we had to come back a lot to some houses because in Los Angeles you have the cleaning days. Once a week you have to move your car from one side of the streets so they could clean it. And it was a perfect day for us to come back to take pictures, elevations of the house. So this, yes, this was one of the rules we had. That so each time we would shot houses and buildings. We would also check the cleaning day, and we would come back later on to shot them without, big cars just in front of it or.
Any other questions?
I can't help but think about Raymond Chandler's novels when I see these kinds of photographs. Like these bright lit, incredibly classical novels in some ways that always feature, your detective Philip Marlowe, who is a kind of impossible protagonist. He moves through the city, and the only way to make sense of him as a character is to realize that he's actually a beautiful woman, because he's continually in situations where he's about to get murdered and then men inexplicably do things for him. It's very strange, like the construction of the character is very strange. And all the way through the Chandler detective novels, like these Maltese Falcon, Farewell, My Lovely, these kind of genre-defining novels of the 1930s and 1940s of Los Angeles, the city exists as a kind of protagonist. Sometimes families will move entire houses from one neighborhood to another, from one identical plot to another, in order to stay with their social economic cohort, or a valley will become ruined because someone will find oil in it. And so you have this kind of biography of the city built into the novels as well. And they're strangely sinister because they're so brightly lit. Like because the sun is always shining, the shadows are somehow much, much darker. And I wonder, like, there's something in your work of this fascination that you show these very beautiful suburban facades, but then always beneath it, and I think maybe that's also Peter's question as well, there's always that sense of something lingering there that's going to burst forth. If you could characterize your own experiences, did you see that kind of two-faced aspect to Los Angeles? Was it a city for you that was in some ways polarized? Could you imagine your book as not just a book of architecture, but a book used by, let's say, a filmmaker who's looking for sites for shooting a sinister film?
Yeah, you mentioned Raymond Chandler, right? Yeah, it's very interesting you say that because we are very we love this guy and and it's very interesting how in his books he's always giving addresses of where we are in Los Angeles, and it's also drawn like a map of the city when you read him. So as a glimpse to him, we noticed at the end of the book there are all the addresses of every single picture is notified with where we shot it, and it was very interesting because Los Angeles doesn't have that much. They don't name streets after famous people. It's mainly trees or landscape stuff or sunset or sunrise or that kind of or viewpoint from blah blah. And so that was very funny to list all those addresses and to think about Chandler when we did that. But for sure that could be a book for the movie industry. You know, we really wanted to do like a directory kind of book, just to. It's like Los Angeles is a very cinematic city. You know, you drive, so you experience the town at the 25 miles per hour speed. You know. And so we wanted to have the same feeling when we turn the page of the book. You have this continuity between pictures as you can have when you drive there.
Thank you.
To the end of our lecture. Thank you all for attending, and thank you very much for this lecture. Thank you.
Thanks.
There's a book of our work and a little gift.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can we have a photograph?